The full moon cast Juniper Valley in silvery light as 3 shotgun blasts shattered the midnight silence. By dawn, 5 bodies lay scattered across the courtyard of Whispering Pines Ranch, their blood staining the frost-covered ground. Standing on the porch was a slender woman in a faded blue dress, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, a smoking Winchester rifle held with unnerving steadiness in her weathered hands. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Folks would later whisper that the most dangerous force in Juniper Valley wasn't the harsh winters or the mountain lions that stalked the high country. It was the quiet widow who ran the small horse ranch 10 miles outside of town. But nobody believed that, not until the day the Raven brothers and their gang rode in from the west. The morning sunlight spilled across the valley floor, setting the autumn aspens ablaze with golden light as Catherine Kate Sullivan began her day with the same methodical precision that had defined her existence for the past 6 years. The small ranch she maintained stood in pristine condition, a monument to order amidst the wild backdrop of the Silverback Mountains. Her routine never varied: feed the horses at dawn, mend fences until mid-morning, then return to the house to prepare for any travelers needing lodging on their journey through the pass. The ranch house gleamed with careful attention: pine floors polished to a warm glow, brass fixtures burnished until they caught the light like newly minted coins. Everything had its place in Kate's world, each task performed with quiet concentration. This meticulousness was her armor, her sanctuary against memories that threatened to surface in unguarded moments. Kate stood at her kitchen window, steam rising from the cup of coffee cradled in her hands. From this vantage point, she could survey her entire property: the weathered barn with its fresh coat of red paint, the corral where 3/4 horses grazed peacefully, the long drive that connected her isolated existence to the road toward town. Her eyes, the color of storm clouds, missed nothing as they scanned the landscape, a habit so ingrained she no longer recognized it as unusual. There was something in her bearing that told a more complicated story than the simple widow she presented to the world. It whispered in the way she moved. Economical, balanced, always aware of her surroundings. It showed in how she positioned herself in a room, back to the wall, eyes on the door, never truly at rest. Small details that most overlooked, but that told of a different life, one buried beneath 6 years of careful reinvention. "Morning, Mrs. Sullivan," called Elijah Cooper, the freckle-faced 17-year-old who rode out twice weekly to deliver mail and supplies from town. "Got your flour and coffee beans. Ma wants to know if you'll be joining us for the Harvest Festival on Sunday. The whole town'll be there." Kate's smile was practiced, warm enough to be polite, distant enough to discourage further questions. "Please thank your mother for the invitation, Eli, but I've got horses that need tending. Another time, perhaps." The same answer she'd given to every social invitation for 6 years, ever since she'd arrived in Juniper Valley with nothing but a wagon, 2 horses, and a small trunk bound with iron straps that remained locked beneath her bed. Elijah's enthusiasm dimmed slightly, the same look of pity crossing his young face that Kate saw in most townsfolk's eyes. Poor lonely widow, keeping to herself all these years. If only she'd make an effort to join the community. "Well, offer stands if you change your mind," he said, handing over the mail. A newspaper from Denver, 3 weeks old, and a catalog from a mercantile in Colorado Springs. "Pa says we'll get the first snow within the fortnight. Might want to stock up extra before the pass gets difficult." Kate nodded her thanks, already scanning the newspaper headlines. "I'm well prepared for winter, Eli. Been watching the geese fly south for 2 weeks now. Your father's right about the snow coming." Her eyes caught on a small article near the back pages. Something about a bank robbery in Silverdale, 70 miles west. Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the paper's edge before she folded it closed with deliberate care. Inside the house, memories haunted the corners, despite her efforts to exorcise them with cleanliness and order. The mantelpiece held only two personal items amid the polished simplicity: a silver pocket watch suspended from a hook, its case engraved with the initials JS, and a small daguerreotype of a man with kind eyes and a serious expression. John Sullivan, her husband, 6 years dead. His gentle face stared out from the frame, seeming to follow her as she moved through her daily tasks. After the doctor's buggy disappeared down the road, Kate moved through the house with new purpose. She pulled the Colt from its hiding place, checking it with practiced hands that belied her image as a simple rancher's widow. From beneath a loose board in her bedroom, she retrieved a small leather pouch containing gold coins, emergency funds never touched in 6 years of honest living. Finally, she unlocked the iron-bound trunk at the foot of her bed. She stared at its contents for a long moment. A man's denim jacket, the collar still bearing a dark stain that had never fully washed out. A worn leather belt with a holster that had molded perfectly to the Colt now in her hand. A battered journal filled with elegant handwriting that wasn't hers. And wrapped in oilskin at the bottom, a second pistol, a nickel-plated Remington with pearl grips, meticulously maintained despite years of disuse. 6 years, she whispered to the empty room, her fingers hovering over the Remington. 6 years of peace. She closed the trunk without touching the gun, locking it with a key she wore on a leather cord around her neck, hidden beneath her high-collared dress. Kate spent the remainder of the afternoon in careful preparation, checking window latches, moving essential supplies to the small cellar beneath the kitchen, bringing the horses in from the far pasture. To a casual observer, she might have been preparing for the coming winter, but there was a precision to her movements that spoke of different concerns. As dusk settled over the valley, painting the Silverback Mountains in shades of lavender and gold, Kate stood on her front porch, coffee cup in hand, a widow taking her evening respite. But her eyes never stopped scanning the road, the tree line, the shadows between buildings. The Colt was tucked into the pocket of her apron, its weight both foreign and familiar against her hip after so many years. Inside the house, a single lamp burned in the front window, a beacon for travelers, a tradition she'd maintained even after John's death. The ranch had been his dream, a way station for those journeying through the pass, offering clean beds and hot meals to weary travelers. Kate had kept it going in his memory, or so she told the townsfolk. The truth, like most things in her life, was more complicated. Night settled fully over Juniper Valley, stars emerging like diamond chips against black velvet. Kate remained on her porch longer than usual, listening to the night sounds, the soft nickering of horses in the barn, the distant call of an owl hunting in the meadow, the whisper of aspens in the light breeze. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds, until they weren't. Her body registered the change before her conscious mind, a subtle shift in the rhythm of the night, a new tension in the air. The owl had gone silent. Far down the road, barely perceptible, came the sound of approaching horses moving at a walk, riders taking care to muffle the noise of their approach. Kate slipped inside, moving through her darkened house with the confidence of someone who had measured each step, memorized every creaking board. She extinguished the lamp in the front window, then positioned herself at the side window where shadows would conceal her presence while affording a clear view of the approach to the house. 4 riders emerged from the darkness, their silhouettes in black against the starlit road. They approached slowly, with the cautious confidence of men who believed they had the advantage of surprise. Their leader raised a hand, and the small party halted at the edge of the property. Even in the darkness, Kate could make out the distinctive shape of rifles in saddle scabbards, the bulky outlines of men prepared for violence. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Kate's breath slowed, her heartbeat settling into a steady rhythm she hadn't felt in 6 years. Fear dissolved, replaced by a cold clarity that sharpened her senses. Time seemed to stretch as she watched them dismount, tethering their horses to her fence with the casual disregard of men who expected no resistance. "Fan out," the leader's voice carried clearly in the night air. "Check the barn first. Could be hiding there." His tone held a lazy confidence, a predator certain of his quarry. Kate weighed her options with the dispassionate calculation of a chess player. 4 men, heavily armed, expecting a frightened widow. The road to town was 10 miles of open country, no escape there. The mountains behind offered cover but also peril in the approaching winter. This confrontation had found her despite 6 years of careful living, of reinventing herself as the model of rural respectability. Running woodenly delay the inevitable. Something cold and hard settled in her chest, a familiar resolve she had hoped never to feel again. Kate Sullivan, the widow who baked bread for travelers and kept the cleanest house in the valley, had spent 6 years burying another woman beneath layers of domesticity and quiet grief. But as she watched the Raven brothers and their men spread out across her property, moving with the practiced coordination of men accustomed to violence, she felt that other self-stirring. The woman she had been before John Sullivan had shown her another path, before she had buried her past alongside. His body in the small cemetery behind the church in town. They had found Catherine Sullivan, widow and rancher. But they would soon discover they were facing someone else entirely. The woman once known throughout the territories as the Ghost, the most successful stagecoach robber west of the Mississippi, who had never left witnesses and had never been caught. Until tonight, that part of her had remained dormant, a past identity locked away as securely as the Remington in her trunk. But as the first of the Raven brothers crept onto her porch, testing the door with a confident hand, Kate felt the last 6 years of peaceful existence falling away like autumn leaves in a storm. "Time to remember who you were," she whispered to herself, drawing the Colt from her apron pocket with a hand that no longer trembled. The weight of it felt like reconnecting with an old friend, or perhaps awakening a sleeping demon. The door latch clicked as someone worked at the lock. Kate stepped back into the deepest shadows, her body falling naturally into a forgotten stance. For the first time in 6 years, Catherine the Ghost Sullivan allowed herself to remember exactly who and what she truly was. And as the door began to swing open, she smiled. Not the gentle smile of the widow, but the cold, calculating smile of a predator who had just spotted unwary prey walking into a trap of their own making. The floorboard on Kate's porch gave a telltale creak, the one she had deliberately left, unrepaired for just such a night. In the darkness, she heard the intruder pause, testing his weight before proceeding. Amateur, she thought, moving silently to position herself behind the door. A professional would have known better than to approach. The front entrance directly. The lock clicked as it gave way to whatever tool the man was using. The door swung open, releasing a whisper of cold mountain air into the warmth of her home. A silhouette appeared, broad-shouldered, cautious, one hand extended to feel his way in the darkness, the other undoubtedly holding a weapon. Kate held, her breath counting the man's steps as he moved into her parlor. 1, 2, 3. He passed the threshold completely, his attention focused on the dim shapes of furniture ahead. In one fluid motion that felt like a dance step from another lifetime, Kate closed the door behind him with a decisive click. The intruder spun around, but Kate was no longer there, having already melted into the shadows of the adjacent dining room. She heard his startled curse, the telltale sound of a revolver being cocked. "Easy now," she called, her voice calm despite the thunder of her heart. "This is private property you're trespassing on." "Mrs. Sullivan," the man's voice held false concern. "Apologies for the late hour, ma'am. Door was open and with reports of mountain lions in the area, I was concerned for your safety." Kate almost laughed at the transparent lie. The door had been securely locked and they both knew it. She remained silent, letting the darkness work to her advantage, tracking his movements by sound alone as he shifted his weight, trying to pinpoint her location. "Got no quarrel with you, ma'am," he continued, his tone attempting reassurance while his body language, the careful positioning, the weapon held ready, told a different story. "Just looking for someone. A woman who might have passed through these parts some years back. Many travelers come through Juniper Valley." Kate moved silently to her right, circling toward the kitchen, where the moonlight through the window would put illumination at her back, leaving him squinting into shadow. "I mind my business, and they mind theirs." Frustration crept into his voice. This particular woman would have been memorable, goes by different names. Last we heard, she married a rancher and disappeared, might even be calling herself a widow now. Kate stepped into position, the faint moonlight from the kitchen window casting her as a ghostly silhouette. The intruder turned toward the movement, his gun hand twitching with uncertainty. In the dim light, she recognized him, the youngest of the Raven brothers, his right cheek marred by a long scar that pulled his mouth into a permanent half-sneer. She had given him that scar 6 years ago, the night everything changed. "Strange way to make inquiries," Kate observed, her voice colder now, breaking into a woman's home in the dead of night. Not when the woman might be a murderer and thief with a $5,000 bounty on her head. He took a step forward, gaining confidence as his eyes adjusted to the gloom. "You know, Mrs. Sullivan, you favor her something powerful. This ghost woman we're hunting." Kate's finger rested lightly on the Colt's trigger. One clean shot, and the threat would be reduced by a quarter. But the other 3 men were still outside, and a gunshot would bring them running. "I get a lot of questions about my resemblance to people," she replied, voice steady. "Must have one of those common faces." His laugh was ugly. "Nothing common. About the woman I'm thinking of? She shot my brother Ezra dead in a stage robbery near Pikes Peak, cut my face open when I tried to stop her." His eyes narrowed, searching her features in the dim light. "Left me with a reminder I see every morning. In the mirror. Been looking for her a long time." Outside, a horse nickered softly. The sound reminded Kate that time was not on her side. 3 more men waited in her yard, and if young Raven didn't return soon, they'd come looking. "Sorry to disappoint you," she said, "but I've been in Juniper Valley for 6 years. Before that, I was in St. Louis with my husband. Whoever you're looking for, I'm not her." The lie fell from her lips with practiced ease. 6 years of reinvention had made her an accomplished performer. The truth, that Catherine Reeves had indeed shot Ezra Raven during a stage robbery gone wrong, had indeed slashed the younger brother's face while escaping, remained buried beneath the identity she had crafted as Kate Sullivan, grieving widow. Young Raven took another step toward her, close enough now that she could smell tobacco and whiskey on his breath. "Why don't we step outside and discuss this with my brothers? They're real eager to make your acquaintance, Mrs. Sullivan." "I think not," Kate replied. "It's late, and I don't entertain gentlemen callers after dark. I'll have to ask you to leave." His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist in a bruising grip. "You're coming with us, willing or not. Marcus Raven wants to look you in the eye when he puts a bullet in your head." Kate let the widow's mask slip completely. Her body responded with muscle memory honed through years of danger, twisting her, captured wrist outward against his thumb, the weakest point of his grip, simultaneously driving her knee sharply upward. The young Raven doubled over with a strangled gasp, his gun clattering to the floor. She could have ended it there, a quick shot, a permanent solution, but gunfire would bring the others, and she needed time. Instead, Kate brought the butt of her Colt down hard on the back of his skull. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious but alive. Moving quickly, she bound his hands and feet with kitchen twine, gagged him with a dish towel, and dragged his limp form into the root cellar accessed through a trap door in her pantry. The entire process took less than 2 minutes, evidence of skills no ordinary ranch widow should possess. Kate closed the cellar door, sliding a heavy flour barrel over the trapdoor to conceal it. Outside, she could hear the low murmur of voices growing concerned at their companion's prolonged absence. She needed a distraction, something to buy her time to think. In her bedroom, Kate knelt before the iron-bound trunk once more. This time, she removed the pearl-handled Remington, loading it with swift, practiced movements before tucking it into the waistband at the small of her back. From the bottom of the trunk, she retrieved a small leather-bound book, John's journal, and tucked it into her pocket. If she had to run tonight, she would not leave it behind. Moving to the window, she assessed her options. 3 men remained outside. Marcus Raven, the eldest and leader, the middle brother whose name she had never learned, and a 4th man, tall and lean, who moved with the easy confidence of a professional gunman. They had spread out around her. Property, Marcus by the front gate, the middle brother checking the barn, and the gunman circling toward the back of the house. Kate made her decision. Grabbing a lantern, she slipped out through the kitchen door into the darkness, staying low, and using the shadows to conceal her movement. She circled behind the barn, approaching it from the blind side where the middle Raven brother was now inside, searching through stalls by lantern light. Her horses shifted nervously as she entered, sensing the tension. The Raven brother turned, at the sound, drawing his gun. "Evening," Kate called pleasantly, stepping into the lantern light, her hands visible and empty. "Looking for something in my barn." Surprise flashed across his face, followed by suspicion. He was older than his scarred brother, with a thick mustache and cold eyes that assessed her with dangerous speculation. "Mrs. Sullivan, I presume?" His gun remained pointed at her chest. "Where's my brother?" Kate shrugged, the picture of confused innocence. "I haven't seen anyone but you, heard noises in my barn and came to investigate." She glanced around as if noticing the signs of intrusion for the first time. "Are you alone? What are you doing?" "On my property." The middle Raven's eyes narrowed. "Don't play games, woman. Daniel went to your house 20 minutes ago. He didn't come back." "Perhaps he left," Kate suggested, taking a casual step to her right, positioning herself better. "I've been in the root cellar, checking my winter stores. Could have missed him." The lie was transparent, and they both knew it. The Raven brother's finger tightened on the trigger of his revolver. "I don't think so," he said. "I think you know exactly where he is. And I think you're exactly who we've been looking for. Catherine Reeves, the ghost." Kate dropped all pretense of confusion, her posture shifting subtly into a fighter's stance. "It's Sullivan now," she corrected. "Kate Sullivan. Catherine Reeves died 6 years ago, along with your brother Ezra." His face twisted with rage. "You admit it then?" "I'm admitting nothing," Kate replied, her voice steady. "Just suggesting you and your brothers might want to leave Juniper Valley. There's nothing for you here but trouble. You killed Ezra." Cut. Daniel's face to ribbons. He advanced a step, gun unwavering. "Marcus has been planning what he'll do to you for 6 years. He won't be leaving without seeing that through." "That's unfortunate," Kate said, her hand inching toward the small of her back where the Remington waited, "because only one of us is walking out of this barn, and I don't intend for it to be you." His laugh was harsh in the lantern light. "You're outnumbered and outgunned, Ghost. Even if you take me down, Marcus and Slade are out there. They'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." "They can try," Kate replied, then kicked the lantern at his feet. The glass shattered, kerosene spilling across. The dry straw of the barn floor, Flames erupted instantly, creating a barrier between them. The middle Raven brother fired blindly through the sudden wall of fire, the bullets splintering wood inches from Kate's head. She drew the Remington and returned fire, catching him in the shoulder. His scream of pain was nearly drowned out by the frightened whinnying of horses. Kate rushed to the stalls, throwing open the gates, slapping the panicked animals toward the barn doors. They bolted instinctively away from the flames, crashing out into the night. The commotion had the desired effect. Outside, she heard shouts of alarm as Marcus Raven and the gunman's Slade spotted the fire and the escaping horses. Kate used the confusion to slip out the back of the barn, staying low and moving quickly through the shadows toward the corral, where her grey mare stood saddled and ready. Another precaution she had taken when Doc Bishop first brought news of strangers. Behind her, the barn fire spread rapidly, illuminating the night with an orange glow that would soon be visible from as far away as town. The middle Raven brother staggered out the front entrance, clutching his bleeding shoulder, shouting warnings to his companions. Kate reached the grey mare, swinging up into the saddle with practiced ease. She had perhaps a minute before they realized she was escaping. Guiding the horse with pressure from her knees, she circled wide around the burning barn, keeping to the edges of the property where shadows remained deepest. A shot rang out, followed by Marcus Raven's voice bellowing commands. They had spotted her. Kate leaned low over her mare's neck, urging her to a gallop. More shots followed, bullets whining past in the darkness. The path to town was exposed, open country that would leave her vulnerable in the moonlight. Instead, Kate turned the mare toward the mountains, toward the high forest trails that only locals knew. If she could reach the old mining paths before they organized pursuit, she might lose them in the rugged terrain. Behind her, the burning barn collapsed with a roar, sending a fountain of sparks into the night sky. Her house would be next, she knew. The Raven brothers would burn everything rather than let her escape. 6 years of building a new life, gone in a single night. Kate felt a moment of grief for the sanctuary she was losing, but pushed it aside. She was alive, and as long as she remained so, she could rebuild. The ghost had survived worse situations than this. The mare's hooves thundered across the valley floor, eating up the distance to the tree line. Kate risked a glance back and saw riders in pursuit, 3 of them silhouetted against the burning remains of her barn. The youngest must still be unconscious in her root cellar. She allowed herself a grim smile at the thought of Marcus Raven's rage when he discovered his brother trussed up like a holiday turkey. The first bullet that found its mark struck her upper arm, the impact nearly unseating her. Hot pain blossomed immediately, blood soaking her sleeve. Kate gritted her teeth and pushed on, guiding the mare into the shelter of the pines that marked the beginning of the mountain trail. The darkness under the trees swallowed them, the sounds of pursuit growing more distant as the Raven brothers were forced to slow their approach to the unfamiliar terrain. Kate's arm throbbed with each beat of her heart, but the wound, while painful, wasn't life-threatening. She had suffered worse and kept riding. The trail grew steeper, forcing her to slow the mare to a careful walk. After 20 minutes of climbing, she reached a vantage point that overlooked the valley. Pausing to catch her breath and assess her wound, Kate looked back at what had been her home. Her house was fully engulfed now, flames shooting from every window, the roof already partially collapsed. The light of the fire revealed the 3 riders circling the property, searching for her trail. They would find it soon enough. Even in darkness, Marcus Raven had reputation as a skilled tracker. Kate tore a strip from her petticoat to bind her arm, stemming the blood flow as best she could. The bullet had passed clean through the muscle, missing bone, painful but manageable. She allowed herself exactly 1 minute to mourn her losses, the house John had built with his own hands, the life she had carefully constructed, the peace she had found in simple routines. Then, with the practiced compartmentalization that had kept her alive through years as the ghost, Kate Sullivan tucked her grief away and focused on survival. She had gold coins sewn into the hem of her dress, 2 guns with ammunition, a good horse, and knowledge of the mountain terrain that her pursuers lacked. It would have to be enough. Urging the mare forward, Kate followed the mining trail deeper into the mountains. There was a place she could go, an abandoned prospector's cabin, high in the silverbacks that few knew existed. John had shown it to her years ago, a secret retreat they had used during happier times. If she could reach it by dawn, she might find temporary shelter while planning her next move. The night grew colder as she climbed higher, her breath and the mare's forming small clouds in the mountain air. The coming winter would arrive soon, bringing snow that would make these trails impassable. Kate considered her options with cold pragmatism. She could try to lose the ravens in the mountains, then circle back to town once they gave up the search. But Marcus Raven had waited 6 years for revenge. He was unlikely to abandon the hunt easily. She could flee the territory entirely, start over somewhere even more remote. But that would mean leaving behind the few connections she had made, Doc Bishop's quiet friendship, the life she had built, John's grave in the town cemetery. Or she could end it, turn and fight, eliminate the threat permanently. The thought sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the mountain air. 6 years ago, she had sworn to John as he lay dying that she would leave that life behind, that the ghost would disappear forever. It had been his dying wish, and she had honored it until tonight. The trail narrowed as it wound around a rocky outcropping. Below, the valley stretched out, her burning homestead now just a distant orange glow against the darkness. Far behind her, she could make out smaller pinpricks of light, lanterns carried by her pursuers. They were still following, still hunting. Kate urged the mare forward, pushing deeper into the mountains. Questions of morality and promises would have to wait. For now, survival was all that mattered. The ghost might have been buried 6 years ago, but tonight she had risen from her grave by necessity. The irony wasn't lost on her. John had saved her once, offering a different path when she had been cornered by a posse near Denver. He had hidden her, then courted her, showing her a life beyond violence and theft. He had believed in redemption, in second chances. Now his murderers had found her, forcing her back into the life she had left behind. Hours passed as Kate navigated the treacherous mountain trails by moonlight. Her arm throbbed with dull persistence, and fatigue dragged at her like weights. The mare, too, was tiring, foam flecking her dark coat despite the cold night air. Just before dawn, Kate reached the prospector's cabin, little more than a crude shelter of logs and a stone chimney tucked into a protective fold of the mountainside. It had been years since she had visited, but someone had maintained it. Fresh-cut firewood was stacked against the outer wall, and the pine plank door swung, open on well-oiled hinges. Inside, the cabin's single room was spare but serviceable. A narrow cot against one wall, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a small iron stove for heat and cooking. Kate lit the oil lamp hanging from a ceiling beam, its warm glow revealing a space that was surprisingly clean, free of the dust and animal intrusions she had expected. She tended to the mare first, unsaddling her and settling her in the small lean-to attached to the cabin's northern wall. A metal bucket contained fresh water, further evidence that someone had been here recently. Kate's instincts prickled with warning. The cabin should have been abandoned, forgotten. Instead, it showed signs of regular use. She drew the Remington, checking that it was loaded before turning her attention to the cabin's interior. On the table lay a leather-bound book, similar to John's journal. Kate approached it cautiously, keeping her back to the wall as she reached for it. The book fell open to reveal a familiar handwriting, not John's flowing script, but the precise measured lettering of Doc Harriet Bishop. October 12, 1876. Restocked the cabin today. Winter comes early to the high country, snow on the peaks already. Left extra supplies in case Kay needs to use the refuge. Ravens in town, asking questions. It was only a matter of time. Kate's breath caught. The doctor had known, perhaps all, along who she really was, had prepared this place as a refuge. The entry was dated just 3 days ago. She sank into one of the rough chairs, suddenly overwhelmed by the revelation. All these years of careful secrecy, of maintaining her widow's facade, and Harriet had known the truth. How many others had seen through her disguise? Sheriff Madison, Elijah Cooper and his family? The thought was unsettling. Outside, the first pale light of dawn limned the eastern mountains. Kate moved to the cabin's single window, a square opening, covered with oiled paper that let in light while blocking the worst of the wind. From this vantage point, she could see down into the valley, now wreathed in morning mist. No sign yet of the ravens, but they would be coming. For the first time since fleeing her burning home, Kate allowed herself to fully consider her situation. The widow's life she had built was gone, destroyed in a single night of violence. The ghost, the identity she had buried alongside her husband, had resurfaced by necessity. Now she stood at a crossroads, caught between her promise to John and her will to survive. The ravens would not stop hunting her, even if she fled to another territory, another identity. The threat would remain, not just to her, but potentially to anyone who helped her. Doc Bishop had already put herself at risk by preparing this refuge. Kate's fingers closed around John's journal in her pocket. She had spent 6 years honoring his memory by burying her past. Perhaps now it was time to honor him differently, by protecting the community he had loved, by ensuring the ravens could never threaten it again. The ghost had been a thief and a survivor, but never a protector. Kate Sullivan had learned to build, to nurture, to belong. Neither identity alone would be enough for what lay ahead. She would need to become something new, something that combined the ghost's deadly skills with Kate Sullivan's conscience and connection. As the sun crested the mountains, painting the cabin in gold light, Catherine Sullivan made her decision. She would not run further. The ravens had brought war to her door, threatened her home, destroyed everything she had built. Now they would learn why she had been called the ghost, not because she disappeared, but because those who crossed her rarely lived to tell the tale. The prospector's cabin became Kate's sanctuary for 3 days, as a late autumn storm swept through the Silverbacks, veiling the mountains in sheets of icy rain that would erase any tracks she had left. Her wounded arm throbbed less now, thanks to the medical supplies Doc Bishop had thoughtfully stocked. Another sign the doctor had anticipated this day might come. Kate stood at the cabin's small window, watching the storm gradually yield to weak sunshine on the 4th morning. Her decision to stay rather than flee had crystallized during those quiet days of recovery and reflection. The question now was how to confront the ravens without endangering the people of Juniper Valley. The crunch of approaching footsteps outside sent Kate instantly into a defensive position, Remington drawn and cocked before the sound had fully registered. She pressed herself against the wall beside the door, breathing controlled and steady despite the surge of adrenaline. 3 sharp knocks followed, then a familiar voice. "It's Harriet, Kate. I'm alone." Kate hesitated, scanning the clearing visible through the window for signs of an ambush before cautiously unbarring the door. Doc Bishop stood on the threshold, medical bag in hand, her hat and coat glistening with moisture from the recent storm. "You've lost weight," the doctor observed without preamble, stepping inside and assessing Kate with a professional eye. "And that bandage needs changing." "How did you know I was here?" Kate asked, lowering the Remington, but not holstering it. Harriet set her bag on the table, removing her damp coat. "Process of elimination. You weren't in the ruins of your place and you hadn't shown up in town. This cabin seemed the logical choice." She paused, her normally stoic expression softening. Besides, I've suspected who you really were almost. Since you arrived in the valley, you carry yourself differently than most widows, more like a soldier after a war. Kate moved away from the door, keeping Harriet in her peripheral vision despite their years of acquaintance. Old habits resurfaced easily. If you knew, why didn't you ever say anything? Everyone deserves a second chance, Harriet replied simply, opening her medical bag. You were building something good here. Wasn't my place to disturb that. She gestured to Kate's arm. Now let me see that wound before infection sets in. As the doctor worked, Kate remained silent, absorbing the revelation that her carefully constructed identity had been at least partially transparent to this perceptive woman. Finally, she asked the question foremost in her mind: what's happening in town? Harriet's hands never paused in their efficient work. The Ravens have made quite an impression. They've taken over Donovan's boarding house, practically commandeered the saloon. Sheriff Madison tried to question them about your place burning. Down, but their hired gun, Slade, I believe they call him, persuaded him to back off. Persuaded? Kate's voice hardened. Broke his arm, Harriet replied matter-of-factly. Nothing I couldn't set, but the message was clear enough. The youngest, Raven, turned up the next day, furious about being trussed up in your cellar. Been making threats against anyone who might be helping you. Kate absorbed this information with growing coldness. And the townspeople. Scared, Harriet tied off the fresh bandage. But not as cowed as the Ravens might hope. There's been talk. People remember how John Sullivan stood up to claim jumpers and cattle thieves when he first settled here. He was respected. She met Kate's eyes directly. As are you, whether you know it or not. The statement caught Kate off guard. I've kept to myself for 6 years. And yet, you've never turned away a traveler needing shelter, never refused to. Help when the Cooper boy broke his leg out near your property, never missed sending preserves and bread to the church's winter food stores. Harriet repacked her bag with methodical precision. People notice such things, especially in a small community. The doctor's words stirred something unexpected in Kate, a sense of connection she had deliberately avoided cultivating. She had maintained her distance from Juniper Valley's residents, convinced her secret past made genuine belonging impossible. Now Harriet suggested otherwise. The Ravens won't leave until they find me, Kate said finally, and they won't hesitate to hurt anyone who stands in their way, so I gathered, Harriet replied dryly. The question is, what do you intend to do about it? End it, Kate answered simply, but first I need information and supplies. Harriet nodded, as if this response was expected. I brought what I could, without arousing suspicion. She reached into her coat and produced a folded paper. The Ravens' routine, noted by Josiah from the general store. They're creatures of habit, which works to your advantage. Kate unfolded the paper, scanning Josiah's careful handwriting with surprise. He's helping me? More than just him, Harriet said. There's a network forming. Quietly, of course. The Ravens may have frightened Sheriff Madison, but they've underestimated the town's resolve. This revelation shifted Kate's perspective dramatically. She had been planning to face the Ravens alone, to protect the town by drawing them away. The idea that Juniper Valley might stand with her had never entered her calculations. They don't know what they're getting into, Kate cautioned. These men are killers. Harriet's expression hardened. So are you, if I'm not mistaken. The difference is you're our killer. She opened her coat again, withdrawing a small leather pouch that clinked with metallic weight. Winchester ammunition. Elijah Cooper left it behind the counter at the general store when the youngest Raven was watching. Bold boy. Kate accepted the ammunition with a complex mix of emotions. You're putting yourselves at risk. The Ravens did that when they rode. In? Harriet countered. Question is, are you Kate Sullivan, the widow who built a respectable life here? Or are you the ghost, the legend they fear? Because Juniper Valley needs both women now. The question echoed Kate's own internal struggle of the past days. John had saved her, offering a path to redemption when she had known only survival by any means necessary. His death had nearly destroyed her, but his legacy, the ranch, the life they had built, had given her purpose. Now that legacy was ashes, burned by the ravens in their quest for vengeance. "Perhaps I'm neither," Kate said slowly, the idea forming as she spoke. "Or perhaps I'm both. The woman who can build and the woman who can destroy." Harriet nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. Now there's someone else who wants to speak with you. Been waiting for the right moment." She moved to the door, opening it to reveal a man standing just outside. Sheriff Thomas Madison, his left arm in a sling, his weathered face grim. Beneath the brim of his hat, Kate's instinctive reach for her gun halted as she recognized him. "Sheriff, risky journey with that broken arm." Madison stepped inside, removing his hat with his good hand. "Mrs. Sullivan, or should I say Miss Reeves?" The direct acknowledgement of her true identity hung in the air between them. Kate didn't deny it, measuring the lawman with new wariness. "If you've come to arrest me, you've picked an inconvenient time." To her surprise, Madison gave a short, humorless laugh. 6 years ago, I might have. The ghost was on every wanted poster from Denver to Cheyenne. But that woman vanished, and Kate Sullivan appeared, a widow who's never broken a law in my jurisdiction. He gestured to his broken arm. "This, however, was inflicted in my town, against an officer of the law. The ravens crossed a line." "They're looking for me," Kate pointed out. "Once they have what they want, they'll leave." "Will they?" Madison challenged. "Men like that don't just leave. They consume places, drain them dry, move on to the next. I've seen their kind before." He met her gaze directly. "Just as I've seen yours." Kate raised an eyebrow. "And what kind is that, Sheriff?" "The kind who knows when fighting is necessary," he replied simply. "I was a Union captain before I pinned on this badge. Saw enough killing in the war to last several lifetimes. But sometimes standing by is worse than drawing a weapon." The conversation had taken an unexpected turn. Kate had anticipated hostility from the law, not this tacit alliance. "What exactly are you proposing?" Madison glanced at Harriet, who nodded encouragement. "A reckoning," he said finally, "but a careful one. The ravens need to be handled without turning Juniper Valley into a battlefield. They've got Slade, who's fast and experienced. Got the youngest one, Daniel, who's mean but careless. The middle brother, Thomas, who you wounded. He's recovered enough to be dangerous. And Marcus himself, who's the calculating type." "You've been watching them closely," Kate observed. "When a snake dens up in your house, you keep track of its movements," Madison replied. "But I'm just one man with a broken wing. This situation calls for someone with specialized skills." Kate understood what he was asking. The sheriff, the embodiment of law in Juniper Valley, was essentially deputizing the ghost. The irony would have amused her under different circumstances. "I've spent 6 years trying to bury those skills," she said quietly. "And now," Harriet prompted. Kate moved to the window, looking out at the mountains she had come to call home. "Now I need to remember them." "There's someone who can help with that," Madison said. "Man who knew the ghost in her prime. Been living as a hermit up beyond Arrow Lake for years. Most folks think he's just a crazy old-timer." Kate turned sharply. "Nathaniel Reed is here? In Juniper Valley?" Madison nodded. "Calls himself Nate Silver now. Traps and trades furs, keeps to himself. But I recognized him years back from my time in Wyoming Territory. A hint of respect colored his voice. The Phantom, they called him then. Best tracker and gunman the Marshals ever had." The revelation struck Kate like a physical blow. Nathaniel Reed, her mentor, the man who had taught her every trick and technique, that had made the ghost legendary. She had believed him dead, killed in a shootout in Laramie. The knowledge that he was alive, that he had been living within miles of her for years, unsettled and intrigued her in equal measure. Reed wouldn't. "Help me," she said finally. "We parted on difficult terms." "He asked for you by name," Harriet interjected. "By your real name. Said it was time to finish what you both started." Kate absorbed this with growing disquiet. If Reed had reached out, the situation was even more serious than she'd realized. The Phantom never broke cover without dire cause. "Where is he?" she asked. "Cabin at White Pine Ridge," Madison replied. "Said to tell you he's watching the ravens. Said you'd understand." Kate nodded slowly. The pieces were falling into place. Not a simple revenge plot by the ravens, but something more calculated. Reed wouldn't have exposed himself for a mere family vendetta. "I need to see him," she decided. "Tonight, I'll take you," Madison offered. "Know the trail, even in darkness." Harriet had been watching their exchange with shrewd assessment. "While you're reconnecting with old friends, I'll continue coordinating in town. The Ravens are planning something for the day after tomorrow, some sort of public demonstration." Josiah overheard them talking. "A trap," Kate concluded. "They know I'm still in the area. They're trying to draw me out. Or send a message about what happens to those who help you," Madison added grimly. "Either way, we're running out of time." The urgency of the situation clarified Kate's purpose. 6 years of peace had not erased the woman she'd been, merely allowed her to build something more upon that foundation. Now both aspects of herself were needed. "I'll need my Winchester from the cabin supplies," she told Harriet. "And I don't suppose you brought any coffee?" Nathaniel was always insufferable without it. The journey to White Pine Ridge took 4 hours on horseback, the trail growing increasingly difficult as they climbed higher. Madison led with the confidence of a man who knew the mountains intimately, despite his injured arm. They traveled in silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts, speaking only when necessary to navigate challenging terrain. Kate found her body remembering old patterns, the balanced seat in the saddle that distributed weight evenly, the reflexive scanning of surroundings for threats or advantages, the controlled breathing that kept fatigue at bay. The ghost was awakening by increments, muscle memory returning with each mile. Near midnight, they approached a small cabin nestled among towering white pines, its location so perfectly concealed by natural features that Kate would have missed it entirely without Madison's guidance. No light showed from its single window, but smoke curled from the stone chimney. Someone was home and awake. "I'll wait here," Madison said, reining his horse at a respectful distance. Some reunions are best conducted in private. Kate dismounted, securing her mare to a low branch. The Winchester rifle felt natural in her hands as she approached the cabin, moving with the silent precision that had once been her trademark. 3 measured steps from the door, she stopped. "You've grown careless, Kitty," a raspy voice called from inside. "Heard you coming 50 yards back." The familiar voice, unchanged by the years, sent a chill of recognition through her. Kate drew a deep breath, then pushed open the cabin door without knocking. Nathaniel Reed sat beside a small fire, a coffee pot suspended over the flames. He looked older, his once black hair and beard now iron-grey, new lines etched into his leathery face, but his eyes remained the same, sharp and assessing beneath bushy brows. A Sharp's rifle rested within easy reach against his chair. "Still dramatic as ever, Nate," Kate replied, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "And still lying about hearing me approach." A smile cracked his weathered features. "Had to see if you'd call my bluff. The Kate I knew would have." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit. Coffee's almost ready." Kate remained standing, Winchester held casually but ready. 6 years, Nate. You've been here 6 years. Same as me, and never once made contact. You wanted to be dead to your old life, he replied simply. Seemed only proper to respect that. He poured coffee into 2 tin cups, the familiar ritual at odds with the tension between them. "Besides," Was a time you'd have shot me on sight, and thought you were dead, Kate countered. The marshal's report said you were killed in Laramie. Nathaniel's smile turned cynical. Convenient, wasn't it? The phantom and the ghost, both erased from the world's memory around the same time. He pushed a cup of coffee toward her. We're ghosts of a different sort now, Kitty. Living reminders of a time best forgotten. Kate finally relented, setting the Winchester aside but within reach, and took the offered chair. Until the ravens arrived. Ah, yes, the ravens. Nathaniel's expression hardened. Not just seeking vengeance for their brother, though that's part of it. They're working for someone with deeper pockets and longer plans. Kate's eyes narrowed. Explain. The bounty on your head, it wasn't just renewed, it was doubled. $5,000 is serious money, but it's not coming from the territorial marshals or stagecoach companies. It's private money. Nathaniel took a long sip of coffee. Someone wants the ghost found and eliminated. The ravens are just the instrument. Who? Kate demanded. And why now after 6 years? Nathaniel set his cup down carefully. That's the real question, isn't it? Who benefits from your death all these years later? He leaned forward, firelight dancing across his craggy features. Remember the Millerton stage job? Last one before you vanished. Kate stiffened. The Millerton robbery had been her final job, the one that had gone so catastrophically wrong. What about it? The strongbox you took. Did you ever look inside? It really look? There was $10,000 in cash, Kate replied, confusion creeping into her voice. John and I used part of it to buy the ranch. The rest is hidden. Nathaniel's expression grew intense. Not just cash, Kitty. Documents. Railroad. Deeds, mining claims, territorial contracts worth a fortune to the right people. Or the wrong ones. Kate absorbed this revelation with growing disquiet. She had never examined the papers in the strongbox, assuming them to be ordinary bank documents of no value compared to the cash. John had suggested burning them to eliminate evidence of the robbery, but she had simply hidden the entire box instead, unwilling to destroy potential leverage. Who wants these papers? She asked finally. Man named Hollister, Nathaniel replied. Sherman Hollister, railroad baron moving into mining interests now. Those documents prove he bribed territorial officials, stole land from legitimate claimants. If they surfaced now, with the federal investigations into railroad corruption, he'd lose everything. And he thinks I have them, Kate concluded. The pieces aligned with terrible clarity. The ravens aren't just seeking revenge, they're recovery. Agents, smart as ever, Nathaniel approved. Hollister hired them when rumors surfaced that the ghost might be alive and living under a new identity in Colorado territory. The youngest raven, the one you marked, he recognized you from descriptions when he saw you in town months ago. They've been planning this carefully. Kate's mind raced, reassessing everything in light of this new information. This isn't just about me. If Hollister gets those documents back, innocent people lose their rightful claims. And if he doesn't, he'll burn Juniper Valley to the ground looking for them, Nathaniel finished grimly. Man like that doesn't leave witnesses. The stakes had just increased exponentially. Kate stood, pacing the small cabin as she processed the implications. I need to recover the strongbox, move it somewhere safer. Won't matter, Nathaniel countered. Hollister won't believe it's gone until you're dead. The ravens are just the first wave. He'll send others. Kate stopped pacing, decision crystallizing. Then we need to end it, definitively. Now you're thinking like the ghost again, Nathaniel approved, but you're out of practice, Kitty. 6 years of baking bread and mending fences doesn't keep your shooting eyes sharp. Then we have work to do, Kate replied, new determination hardening her voice. How long until dawn? Nathaniel checked his pocket watch. 4 hours, not much time. It'll have to be enough. Kate retrieved the Winchester, checking its action. With practiced hands, Show me what you've observed about the Ravens' positions in town, weaknesses, habits, vulnerabilities. As Nathaniel spread a rough map of Juniper Valley on the table between them, Kate felt the last vestiges of her widow's identity receding, replaced by the cold calculation of the ghost. Yet something new remained, a sense of purpose beyond mere survival, a connection to the community she had quietly become part of over 6 years. "You're different," Nathaniel observed, studying her with shrewd assessment. "The ghost I knew wouldn't care about collateral damage, wouldn't worry about the town." "The ghost you knew didn't have anything worth protecting," Kate replied simply. For the next 3 hours, they worked methodically, Nathaniel sharing intelligence about the Ravens' movements and patterns, Kate formulating and discarding plans until a strategy emerged that satisfied them both. Madison joined them eventually, contributing his knowledge of the town's layout and resources. As dawn lightened the eastern sky, Kate Sullivan, or Catherine the Ghost Reeves, the boundaries between identities now deliberately blurred, prepared to reclaim the skills and reputation that had once made her the most feared outlaw in the territory. But this time, she would wield that power not just for herself, but for a community that had quietly become home. The Ravens had wanted to corner a lonely widow. Instead, they would face a legend reborn, one with a purpose beyond mere survival, and as the first ray of sunrise crested the Silverback Mountains, Kate checked her weapons one final time, her movements fluid and certain. The reckoning was coming, and it would reveal which was more dangerous, the Ravens or the ghost they had unwittingly awakened. The day before the Ravens' planned demonstration dawned with unusual clarity, the mountain air crisp enough to make breath visible in small clouds. Kate and Nathaniel worked methodically in the pre-dawn stillness, preparing specialized ammunition at a small table outside his cabin. "Hollow points," Kate murmured, carefully filing the tip of a Winchester round. "Been a while since I made these." Nathaniel grunted, his weathered hands steady as he measured powder with exacting precision. "Remember Sweetwater Pass? You dropped that bounty hunter from 400 yards with one of these." "That was luck," Kate replied, though a hint of pride colored her voice. "Wind was in my favor." "Wasn't luck," Nathaniel countered, crimping a shell with practiced efficiency. "Was. Preparation meeting opportunity, same as now." Kate set down the completed round, flexing fingers stiff from the cold and concentrated work. 6 years of ranch labor had kept her hands strong, but had changed their sensitivity. Where once she could detect the slightest imperfection in a bullet, casing by touch alone, now she relied more on sight. "The town's too exposed," she said, returning to the strategic discussion they'd been having since dawn. "Too many civilians, too many angles for the Ravens to control." Nathaniel stroked his grizzled beard thoughtfully. "That's why they chose it. They're expecting the ghost to strike from the shadows, pick them off one by one. They've positioned themselves to counter exactly that approach. So we change the battlefield," Kate concluded. "Draw them somewhere we control." "Not we," Nathaniel corrected. "You. I'm too old for direct confrontation, Kitty. My eyes aren't what they used to. Me, and my draw hand seizes up in cold weather." He flexed his gnarled right hand demonstratively. "I'll be your spotter, maybe your long-range support, but the close work is yours alone." Kate accepted this assessment without argument. She had noticed his slight wince when working the rifle action, the occasional tremor in his trigger finger. The phantom, like the ghost, had aged. "One thing still bothers me," she said, carefully placing completed rounds into a cartridge belt. "The Ravens have had opportunities to hurt townspeople already, to send messages or draw me out. They've been threatening but relatively contained." "Why?" Nathaniel's shrewd eyes narrowed. "You're right. It's out of character for them, especially the youngest. Daniel Raven's reputation for casual cruelty precedes him." "They're waiting for something," Kate concluded. "Or someone." A horse's approach interrupted their speculation. Sheriff Madison appeared through the trees, riding with careful balance to compensate for his injured arm. His expression was grim as he dismounted. "Telegraph came through from Denver," he announced without preamble. "Hollister's arriving on tomorrow's stage, bringing additional men." Kate and Nathaniel exchanged glances. The timeline had just accelerated dramatically. "How many men?" Kate asked. "Telegraph didn't say," Madison replied. "But Josiah's cousin works for the stage company in Denver. Says Hollister chartered the entire coach. No regular passengers, just his people." "That changes things," Nathaniel said quietly. "They weren't planning a demonstration. They were planning an execution." Kate nodded slowly, the pieces aligning. "The Ravens locate me, hold me until Hollister arrives, then make a public example to show what happens to those who cross him." Her voice hardened. "Only they haven't located me yet, which means—" "They'll use bait," Madison finished. "Someone. They think you'll come for." The realization struck Kate with cold certainty. "We need to get back to town. Now!" They rode hard, pushing their mounts to a dangerous pace down the mountain trails. Kate's mind raced ahead, calculating possibilities. The Ravens wouldn't risk alienating the entire town with mass hostage-taking. They'd select specific targets, people connected to Kate, people whose suffering might draw her out of hiding. Doc Bishop, Elijah Cooper and his family. Perhaps others who had shown her kindness over the years. The sun had reached its zenith when they emerged from the tree line, giving them a clear view of Juniper Valley below. From this distance, everything appeared peaceful. Smoke rising from chimneys, the usual activity around the general store and saloon. But Kate's trained eye noted subtle wrongness. No children playing in the schoolyard, too many horses gathered at Donovan's boarding house. They approached cautiously, using the creekbed for cover until they reached the old mill at the edge of town. Madison had suggested it as a rendezvous point, abandoned years ago, but structurally sound, with good sightlines to the main street. To Kate's surprise, the mill wasn't empty. Josiah Winters from the general store stood watch at an upper window, a Spencer carbine cradled in his arms. He signaled their approach to someone below. Inside, the mill's cavernous main floor had been transformed into an impromptu headquarters. Doc Bishop bent over a rough map of the town spread across an old grinding stone. Beside her stood Elijah Cooper's father, Robert, the blacksmith's massive arms crossed over his chest as he listened to her. 3 other men, ranchers from outlying properties, checked weapons nearby, their expressions grim. "What is this?" Kate asked, surveying the assembled group. "Resistance," Harriet replied simply. "The Ravens made their move this morning, took Elijah and Maya Chen's youngest daughter hostage. They're being held at the saloon under guard." Fury flashed across Kate's face, quickly controlled. "Targets of opportunity?" "No," Robert Cooper's deep voice rumbled. "They came straight for them, knew exactly who to take. Someone's been watching, learning who matters to who in this town." "Slade," Nathaniel said quietly. "He's methodical that way, studies connections, finds pressure points." Madison crossed to the map, studying it intently. "What's their demand?" "Kate Sullivan," Harriet replied, meeting Kate's eyes directly. "Delivered to the saloon by sundown, or they start sending out pieces of the hostages." Kate absorbed this, with cold calculation rather than the horror the Ravens might have expected. Violence as leverage was a language she understood intimately, had once employed herself. And the town's response? "Official or unofficial?" Madison asked grimly. "Both. Officially, I've advised cooperation to prevent bloodshed," the sheriff said. "Bought time by saying we're searching for you in the hills." "And unofficially?" Kate prompted. Robert Cooper patted the greener shotgun leaning against the grinding stone. "Turns out folks here have strong opinions about outsiders threatening our children." Kate surveyed the impromptu militia with new eyes. These weren't trained gunmen, but community members driven to unexpected resolve. Their very ordinariness made them remarkable. The general store owner, the blacksmith, ranchers who normally competed for grazing rights now standing united. "This isn't your fight," she said finally. "The Ravens want me." "They made it our fight when they took my boy," Robert countered, his voice tight with controlled rage. "And they've terrorized this town for days now. Juniper Valley takes care of its own." The statement hung in the air, its implication clear. Despite her reserved manner, her isolation, they considered Kate one of them. The realization shifted something fundamental in her understanding of the past 6 years. She hadn't just been hiding in Juniper Valley, she had been becoming part of it. Connection by connection, interaction by interaction. Hollister arrives. "Tomorrow," she informed them, refocusing on the tactical situation. "That complicates things. The Ravens are holding the hostages until he gets here to personally oversee whatever they have planned." "Who's Hollister?" Josiah asked from his position. By the window, Kate exchanged glances with Nathaniel, who nodded slightly. The time for secrets had passed. "Sherman Hollister, railroad magnate and criminal," she explained. "The Ravens work for him. They're not just after me for revenge, they're after something they think I have, something that could destroy Hollister, if it became public." "And do you have it?" Harriet asked directly. Kate nodded slowly. "Yes, documents proving Hollister bribed territorial officials and stole land claims. I took them during a stage robbery 6 years ago, before I came here, She hesitated. "Before I became Kate Sullivan." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Kate had just confessed to being the ghost to multiple crimes, including armed robbery, in front of the town sheriff and 5 witnesses. "That explains a few things," Robert Cooper said finally. "Always thought you handled a rifle too well for a rancher's widow." A ripple of subdued laughter broke the tension. These people had already guessed or accepted her hidden identity. The confession changed nothing about their willingness to stand with her. Madison cleared his throat. "So, we have 2 priorities. Rescue the hostages and prepare for Hollister's arrival tomorrow." 3 priorities, Kate corrected. "I need to retrieve those documents from where they're hidden. They're our leverage against Hollister, maybe our only protection once this is over." Nathaniel had been studying the map with professional intensity. He tapped a weathered finger on the saloon's location. 4 men inside with the hostages, Daniel and Thomas Raven, plus 2 of their regulars. Marcus and Slade are moving between the saloon and the boarding house, coordinating. "How do you know the distribution so precisely?" Harriet asked with professional curiosity. A ghost of a smile crossed Nathaniel's face. "Been watching them for days from the church bell tower. Old habits." Kate leaned over the map, her mind shifting fully into the tactical thinking that had once been second nature. "The saloon has 3 potential entry points: front door, back door, and the loading entrance to the cellar. Windows are too small. For rapid access," she glanced at Robert Cooper, "the building shares a wall with your smithy, correct?" The blacksmith nodded. "Common wall along the west side, brick about 14 inches thick." "Any access points through it?" Kate asked. "Used to be a doorway, years back," Robert replied thoughtfully. "Bricked over when Donovan bought the saloon, but the mortar was poor quality. Always meant to fix it properly." Kate's eyes lit with strategic possibility. "Show me exactly where on the map." As Robert indicated the location, Kate began formulating a plan that utilized the town's knowledge, the element of surprise, and the skills she had spent years suppressing. The ghost would have approached this as a solo operation, swift, lethal, leaving no survivors. Kate Sullivan saw the value of community, of multiple angles of attack, of measured force. "We'll need a diversion," she said finally. "Something to draw attention to the front of the saloon while we breach through the smithy wall." "I can provide that," Josiah offered. Got a wagon load of blasting powder in my storeroom. Mining supply order that never got picked up. Madison raised his eyebrows. That's substantial firepower for a diversion. Controlled detonation, Nathaniel interjected. Small charge, more noise than damage. Set off down the street. It'll draw their attention without risking civilians. Kate nodded approval. Perfect. While they're focused on that, Robert and I will break through the wall. Madison, you and Nathaniel cover the back entrance in case anyone tries to flee with the hostages. What about Hollister? Harriet asked. Practically. Even if we rescue the hostages, he'll arrive tomorrow with who knows how many men. One problem at a time, Kate replied. But I have thoughts on that too. First, we need those documents. She turned to Madison. My ranch, what's left of it, there's a loose stone in the fireplace hearth on the north side. The strongbox is hidden in the space beneath. I'll fetch it, one of the ranchers volunteered. Know that hearth well. Helped John build it years back. The casual mention of her husband sent an unexpected pang through Kate. John had involved the community in creating their home, forging connections she had later tried to minimize. Yet those very connections might now save lives, including her own. Thank you, she said simply. Be careful. The Ravens may have left someone watching the property. The next hours passed in focused preparation. Kate found herself naturally assuming command, her instincts for coordination and strategy resurfacing as if they'd never been buried. The ghost had always worked alone, trusting no one. Kate Sullivan understood the strength in trusted allies. Late afternoon found Kate and Robert Cooper in the smithy, examining the bricked-over doorway with critical assessment. The wall was solid, but, as Robert had suggested, the mortar was substandard, crumbling. In places, barely holding the bricks together in others. We can break through here with minimal noise, Robert confirmed, tapping a specific section with his hammer. 2 minutes' work, if we're careful. Kate nodded, calculating angles and timing. Through the smithy's side window, she could see the saloon's rear entrance, currently guarded by one of the Ravens' men, a burly individual with a shotgun resting across his knees as he sat on an upturned barrel. Once we're through, I go first, she instructed. The hostages will be at the back, away from windows. The Ravens aren't amateurs. They'll have them secured, probably separated. Robert's expression darkened at the thought of his son in danger. Eli's a smart boy. He'll have been watching, noting their patterns. That's good, Kate acknowledged. But when we come through that wall, I need you focused on securing him and the Chen girl, not engaging the Ravens. That's my responsibility. The blacksmith studied her with newfound respect. You've done this before. Hostage situations. Kate hesitated, then nodded. The ghost's history included darker chapters than simple stagecoach robberies, including one occasion when she'd been the one holding hostages. Yes, from both sides. Robert seemed about to ask more when a commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they saw Thomas Raven striding down the street toward the boarding house, his expression thunderous. Something had agitated him. Kate motioned for silence, easing closer to the open smithy door to listen as Thomas Raven conferred with his brother Marcus outside Donovan's establishment. Deadlines approaching and no sign of her. Thomas was saying, voice tight with frustration. Daniel's getting antsy, threatening the boy. I told him to wait. Marcus Raven's response was too low to hear clearly, but his gesturing toward the mountains suggested he believed Kate was still hiding in the wilderness, unaware of the hostage situation. Hollister won't accept failure, Thomas continued louder now. If she doesn't show by sundown, she'll show. Marcus cut him off with cold certainty. The ghost might not care about these people, but Kate Sullivan will. That's her weakness now. Kate withdrew silently from the doorway, her expression unreadable. Robert raised a questioning eyebrow. They're getting nervous, she explained quietly. Deadlines approaching with no sign of me. That works to our advantage. They'll be distracted, potentially making mistakes. Or they'll hurt the hostages to draw you out, Robert countered grimly. They won't, Kate replied with cold certainty. Not yet. The hostages are their only leverage. If they harm them prematurely, they lose control of the situation. Her eyes hardened. Besides, Hollister will want to make an example of me personally. The Ravens won't rob him of that satisfaction. The sun dipped lower toward the western mountains, shadows lengthening across Juniper Valley. In the mill, the resistance fighters made final preparations. Josiah prepared his blasting powder charges under Nathaniel's expert guidance. Madison checked weapons and assigned positions to the ranchers who would create a perimeter around the saloon, preventing reinforcements from interfering with the rescue. Kate stood apart briefly, staring out the mill's upper window toward the burnt remains of her ranch visible in the distance. 6 years of peaceful existence reduced to charred timbers and ash. The life she had built with John, the redemption she had sought, all of it seemingly destroyed. Yet something new had emerged from those ashes, a connection to this community she had never allowed herself to acknowledge, a strength drawn from others rather than maintained in isolation. The ghost had survived through detachment. Kate Sullivan would fight through belonging. Harriet approached quietly, standing beside her at the window. Second thoughts. Kate shook her head. No, just reconciling. The woman you were with, the woman you've become, Harriet suggested perceptively. Something like that, Kate acknowledged. The ghost operated by certain rules. Trust no one, show no mercy, leave no witnesses. Effective, but lonely, Harriet finished when Kate hesitated. Yes. Kate turned from the window, meeting the doctor's shrewd gaze. I didn't realize how much this place had become home until I was forced to defend it. Harriet smiled slightly. That's generally how it works. We rarely value what we have until it's threatened. The rancher, who had gone to retrieve the strongbox, returned, his approach noted by the lookout. He entered the mill, carrying a metal box roughly the size of a large book, its surface dented and scorched but lock intact. Found it where you said, he reported, handing it to Kate. No sign of anyone watching the property, but I circled wide just in case. Kate accepted the strongbox, feeling its familiar weight. For 6 years, it had remained hidden. A literal buried secret from her past. Now it represented not just personal history, but potential salvation for Juniper Valley. She produced a small key from a chain around her neck and unlocked the box. Inside lay several stacks of banknotes, now worthless due to changes in territorial currency, and beneath them a leather portfolio containing documents, land deeds, contracts, letters on official stationery detailing arrangements that would never withstand public scrutiny. These prove Hollister's crimes, she explained, showing them to Madison. Bribery, fraud, even arranging accidents for legitimate claimants who wouldn't sell. The sheriff examined the papers with growing disgust. This is enough to hang him, or at least strip him of everything he's built. Which is why he's willing to burn down an entire town to get them back, Kate concluded, returning the documents to the box and relocking it. Harriet, these need to stay with you during the operation. If anything goes wrong... It won't, the doctor replied firmly, accepting the strongbox. But I'll keep them safe. Kate checked the position of the sun. Perhaps an hour remained before the Ravens' deadline expired. She gathered the resistance fighters around the map for final instructions. Josiah, you'll set the diversion charge here. She indicated a position down the street from the saloon. Small explosion, but loud, enough to draw attention forward. Robert and I will breach through the smithy wall simultaneously. Madison and Nathaniel will cover the rear exit. The rest of you maintain a perimeter. No one enters or leaves the area once we begin. She made eye contact with each person, assessing their readiness. These weren't hardened gunmen, but ordinary people driven to extraordinary circumstances. Their courage humbled her. "The Ravens are professionals," she continued. "They'll react quickly to the diversion, but they won't all rush to investigate. At least 2 will remain with the hostages. Those are the ones Robert and I will handle." "What about Slade?" Nathaniel asked. "He's the wild card." Kate nodded acknowledgement. "Slade's experienced enough to recognize a diversion. He'll either move to secure the hostages or attempt to flank whoever sets off the explosion. Either way, he's dangerous. If you spot him, priority is neutralizing him before he can engage." "And if this works," Robert asked, "if we get the children out, then we prepare for Hollister," Kate replied grimly. "One battle at a time." As the resistance fighters dispersed to their assigned positions, Kate found herself momentarily alone with Nathaniel. Her former mentor studied her with assessing eyes. "The ghost would have gone in alone," he observed quietly. "Killed everyone, retrieved the hostages, disappeared back into legend." Kate checked her Remington one final time, the pearl grips cool against her palm. "I'm not just the ghost anymore." Nathaniel nodded, satisfaction evident in his weathered features. "No, you're not. You've become something more interesting, more effective too, I suspect." He adjusted his rifle strap with gnarled fingers. "The ghost was a survivor. Kate Sullivan is a protector. The combination makes you formidable in ways Hollister and the Ravens can't anticipate." The observation settled something within Kate. The internal conflict that had plagued her since the night the Ravens arrived. She wasn't choosing between identities, but integrating them, taking the necessary skills of the ghost and applying them with Kate Sullivan's conscience and connection. "Ready?" she asked, moving toward the mill's exit. Nathaniel's smile was wolfish beneath his grizzled beard. "Been ready for 6 years? Let's remind them why they called you the ghost." As the sun dipped toward the western mountains, Kate Sullivan stepped into the deepening shadows, the Remington secure in its holster, the Winchester rifle balanced in her hands. Behind her, the resistance fighters of Juniper Valley moved into position, ordinary people prepared to defend their own. Ahead lay the saloon where the Ravens waited, confident in their control of the situation, unaware that the lonely widow they had cornered had transformed into something far more dangerous than the legend they thought they hunted. The ghost had been feared because she left no survivors. Kate Sullivan would be remembered because she protected them. Dusk settled over Juniper Valley, painting the main street in amber and shadow. On the saloon's front porch, Marcus Raven paced with the contained energy of a predator, periodically checking his pocket watch. Behind him, through the windows, the silhouettes of his men moved between tables, where ordinary revelers would normally sit. Kate observed this from the shadows of the smithy, her body still as stone as she calculated distances and angles. Robert Cooper worked silently beside her, carefully removing bricks from the connecting wall, his massive hands gentle with surprising precision. The occasional clink of mortar falling seemed thunderous in the quiet space, though Kate knew it. Wouldn't carry to the saloon where music played, a calculated addition to cover any sounds of their approach. "Almost through," Robert whispered, easing another brick free. "One more should do it." Kate nodded, checking her weapons one final time. The Remington sat easy in its holster, the Winchester propped within reach. Her mind was clear, focused with the crystalline sharpness that had once been her defining quality as the ghost. Through a gap in the smithy door, she caught sight of Josiah moving into position across the street, the burlap sack containing his diversion charge held casually, as if he were merely transporting goods from his store. Madison and Nathaniel would be at the rear of the saloon by now, ready to prevent escape. Robert removed the final brick, creating an opening just large enough for a person to slip through. Beyond it lay the saloon's back storeroom, dimly lit and stacked with barrels and crates. No guards were visible through the gap, exactly as their intelligence had indicated. "Remember," Kate murmured to Robert, Once we're in, move directly to locate the hostages. Don't engage the ravens unless absolutely necessary." The blacksmith nodded grimly, his normally jovial face set in lines of determination. In his hands, a short-barreled coach gun looked almost like a toy. But Kate knew its devastating effectiveness. At close range, Kate removed her boots, allowing for silent movement across the saloon's wooden floors. She checked her timepiece. 7 minutes until Josiah would set off the diversion. Through the gap in the wall, she studied the storeroom's layout one final time, committing it to memory, identifying potential cover and threat angles. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. When the appointed time arrived, Kate tensed, waiting for the explosion that would begin their assault. Instead, a woman's scream pierced the evening air. Kate and Robert exchanged alarmed glances. This wasn't part of the plan. Through the gap in the wall, Kate could see sudden movement in the saloon beyond the storeroom, men shouting, furniture being overturned. "Something's wrong," she whispered, abandoning caution to peer through the wall opening. "They're agitated, Eli," Robert breathed, fear sharpening his voice. "They've started hurting the hostages." Kate's decision was instantaneous. "New plan. I go now, wait for the diversion, then follow." Before Robert could protest, she slipped through the opening with liquid grace, her stockinged feet making no sound on the storeroom floor. She moved between barrels with the fluid precision that had once made her a legend, the Remington now drawn and ready in her hand. The storeroom door stood slightly ajar, affording a narrow view of the saloon's main room. Kate positioned herself carefully, looking through the opening to assess the situation. The sight froze her blood. Doc Bishop knelt on the saloon floor, blood streaming from a cut on her temple. Daniel Raven stood over her, knife in hand, his scarred face twisted in a parody of a smile. Across the room, Elijah Cooper and the Chen girl huddled together, guarded by Thomas Raven, who held a shotgun trained on them with casual menace. Of Josiah, there was no sign, but his absence explained the change in plans. He must have been discovered while positioning the diversion charge. "Losing patience, Doc," Daniel Raven was saying, his voice carrying clearly through the quiet saloon. "Tick-tock. If Sullivan doesn't show by full dark, you'll be short one ear. Maybe both." Harriet's voice was steady despite her precarious position. "Threatening me won't bring her any faster." "No." Daniel grinned, the expression pulling his scar tight. "Then maybe we should try the boy instead. She's sweet on him, from what folks say. Brings him cakes and such when he delivers her mail." Kate's grip tightened on the Remington. The youngest Raven had always been the most unpredictable, the most sadistic. His use of the knife rather than a gun spoke to a preference for intimate cruelty that made him especially dangerous in the current situation. She assessed the room with cold precision. 4 men visible, Daniel and Thomas Raven, plus 2 of their regular companions positioned near the front windows. No sign of Marcus or Slade, which concerned her. The most dangerous adversaries were unaccounted for. Time for subtlety had passed. With Harriet now a hostage alongside the others, the situation had deteriorated beyond their planned approach. Kate made her decision, holstering the Remington and retrieving a small object from her pocket, a glass vial containing a fine powder, another relic from her days as the ghost. She uncorked it silently, her movements deliberate despite the urgency of the situation. Timing would be crucial. Slipping back to the wall opening, she whispered instructions to Robert. "Change of plans. Harriet's inside, being held with the others. I'm creating a diversion. When it happens, come through fast and get them out through this wall. Don't stop for anything." Before he could question her, Kate moved back to the storeroom. Her door. She listened for a moment, confirming positions by sound, then removed the stopper from the vial completely. With a swift, powerful motion, she threw the vial through the narrow opening into the main saloon room. It shattered against the far wall with a delicate tinkling sound that drew all eyes momentarily. The powder within, disturbed by the impact, billowed outward in an expanding cloud. Within seconds, the first man began to cough, a harsh, desperate sound quickly echoed by others as the caustic substance reached their lungs and eyes. Kate didn't wait for the confusion to peak. She kicked the storeroom door fully open and moved through it in a single fluid motion, the Remington raised and firing in one continuous sequence that had once made her notorious throughout the territory. Her first shot took the nearest of the Raven's men in the shoulder, spinning him away from his position near the hostages. The second caught Thomas Raven in the gun arm, causing the shotgun to discharge harmlessly into the ceiling as he dropped it with a howl of pain. Daniel, partially protected from the powder cloud by his position, recovered faster than his companions. He yanked Harriet up as a shield, pressing his knife to her throat as he squinted through streaming eyes to identify the attacker. "Ghost!" he snarled, recognition and hatred twisting his scarred features. "Drop the gun or the doctor dies!" Kate maintained her stance, the Remington unwavering despite the chaos erupting around them. The powder cloud was dissipating, leaving men coughing and cursing as they struggled to clear their vision. Beyond Daniel, she could see Robert Cooper emerging through the wall opening, moving with surprising stealth for a man his size. "You won't kill her," Kate replied calmly, her voice carrying that peculiar flat quality that had once made hardened. "Outlaws surrender rather than face her. You need hostages. Without them, you're just target practice." Daniel's laugh held a manic edge. "One hostage, 3 hostages. Doesn't much matter now you're here." That was always the point. Was it? Kate took a measured step forward, drawing his attention fully to her, away from Robert, who was now helping Elijah and the Chen girl toward the wall opening. Or was the point the strongbox, the documents that would destroy Hollister? Uncertainty flickered across Daniel's face, a telling hesitation that confirmed Kate's suspicion. The Ravens were enforcers, not strategists. They knew they were seeking documents, but not their full significance. "Don't matter what's in it," Daniel retorted, pressing the knife harder against Harriet's throat. "Just matters that you stole it, killed my brother doing it." "Your brother died because he was careless," Kate replied, continuing her slow advance. "Just like you're being careless now." Her eyes flicked meaningfully over his shoulder. Daniel's instinct to look behind him came a moment too late. The shotgun, blast from Robert Cooper's coach gun, caught him in the side, the impact throwing him away from Harriet with devastating force. The doctor dropped to the floor, rolling instantly toward Kate with the presence of mind to make herself a smaller target. The saloon erupted into chaos. Thomas Raven, despite his wounded arm, managed to draw a pistol with his left hand, firing wildly as he sought cover behind the bar. The remaining Ravens man, who hadn't been incapacitated by Kate's first volley, upended a table for protection, returning fire with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Kate moved with the fluid precision that had once been her hallmark, positioning herself to shield Harriet while maintaining clear firing lines. Her second shot caught Thomas's left shoulder, effectively neutralizing both his arms and taking him out of the fight with a scream of pain and fury. "Where are Marcus and Slade?" Kate demanded, pulling Harriet toward the relative safety of an overturned table. "Went to check on Josiah," Harriet replied, her medical training already asserting itself as she examined Kate for injuries despite her own bleeding temple. "They caught him setting the charge." The implications were immediate and concerning. Marcus Raven and Slade were the most dangerous of their adversaries, experienced, calculating, and now unaccounted for. Worse, they knew the town had organized resistance. Robert had successfully extracted Elijah and the Chen girl through the wall opening. He now provided covering fire from that position, the coach gun's periodic blasts keeping the remaining Ravens Man pinned behind his makeshift barrier. "We need to move," Kate decided, helping Harriet toward the storeroom. "This position is compromised." As if summoned by her words, the saloon's front doors burst open. Marcus Raven stood framed in the entrance, taking in the scene with cold calculation. Behind him, the lean figure of Slade slipped in, immediately seeking a flanking position along the wall. "Catherine Reeves," Marcus called, his voice carrying over the sporadic gunfire. "I've waited 6 years for this moment." Kate positioned Harriet behind her, facing this new threat with the Remington raised and steady. "You've waited 6 years to die? Strange ambition." Marcus's laugh held no humor. Bold words from a cornered rat. He gestured to Slade, who produced a struggling Josiah, gun pressed to the storekeeper's head. "Seems your little resistance movement needs work." The situation had deteriorated rapidly. Daniel lay unmoving where Robert's shotgun blast had thrown him, but Thomas had managed to staunch his bleeding arms and now watched from behind the bar with hateful eyes. The fourth man remained behind his table barricade, gun trained on Kate's position. "Let them go, Marcus," Kate said, nodding toward Harriet and Josiah. "Your quarrel's with me." "My quarrel's with anyone who crosses me," Marcus replied coldly. "And these fine folks have definitely done that." His eyes narrowed. "Where's the strongbox, Catherine? That's all this needs to be about." Kate measured the distance to the storeroom door, calculating whether she could get Harriet to safety before Marcus or Slade could fire. The odds were poor. "Strongbox is secure," she answered. "Far from here." "Liar," Thomas called from behind the bar. "Town this size, there's only so many hiding places." Marcus raised a placating hand toward his brother. "Patience, Thomas. Miss Reeves will tell us everything we need to know." He turned back to Kate, a smile spreading across his face that didn't reach his eyes. "Hollister arrives tomorrow. He's quite looking forward to meeting the infamous ghost." Kate's mind raced, assessing options with the cold calculation that had kept her alive through years of danger. Standard ghost tactics had always been to eliminate the greatest threat. First, in this case, Slade, whose professional competence made him more dangerous than the vengeful ravens. But with Josiah as his shield, a clean shot was impossible. The standoff stretched, tension building like a thunderhead. Outside, darkness had fully descended, the saloon's interior now lit only by the few lamps that had survived the initial confrontation. "Seems we're at an impasse," Marcus observed, his gun unwavering. "But only temporarily. My men have this building surrounded. Your blacksmith friend won't be providing assistance anymore." Kate's heart sank at the implication, but she maintained her impassive expression. "If Robert's harmed, you won't leave this town alive." "Bold threat from someone in your position," Marcus replied. "But irrelevant. None of us are leaving this town until we have what we came for." He gestured to Slade. "Search the doctor. She's the most likely to be carrying it." As Slade moved to comply, dragging Josiah with him, a new sound intruded. Hoofbeats, many of them, approaching rapidly from the north end of town. Marcus's head turned slightly at the noise, confusion briefly replacing confidence. "Expecting reinforcements?" Kate asked, the faintest smile touching her lips. The confusion in Marcus's eyes deepened, then sharpened to alarm as the sound grew louder, at least a dozen riders approaching at speed. He gestured sharply to the man behind the table. "Check it out." The man hesitated, clearly reluctant to expose himself, but Marcus's glare brooked no argument. He moved cautiously to the window, peering out into the darkness. "Riders coming in fast," he reported, voice tight with tension. "Can't make out who." His report ended abruptly as a rifle shot shattered the window, catching him squarely in the chest. He collapsed without another sound, dead before he hit the floor. The sudden violence shocked everyone into momentary stillness. Kate recovered first, using the distraction to shove Harriet toward the storeroom door with urgent whispered instructions. "Go through the wall to the smithy. Find Madison." Outside, the riders had arrived, their horses snorting and stamping in. The street. A voice called out, carrying clearly through the broken window. "Marcus Raven, this is Marshal William Fletcher, Territorial Authority. You and your men are surrounded. Send out the hostages and surrender yourselves." The Territorial Marshals. Unexpected arrival shifted the dynamic instantly. Marcus's face hardened with calculation as he reassessed his options. Slade maintained his professional calm, though his grip on Josiah tightened perceptibly. "Hollister's reach is longer than you thought," Kate commented quietly, using Marcus's momentary distraction to shift her position slightly, seeking a better angle. "Hollister owns half the territorial officials," Marcus replied dismissively, though doubt had crept into his voice. "Fletcher included?" "Not anymore," Kate countered. "The documents you've been seeking, copies were sent to the governor 3 days ago, along with sworn affidavits about Hollister's activities." This was a calculated bluff. The documents remained, secure with Harriet, but Kate had learned long ago that confidence often trumped truth in such confrontations. The uncertainty that flashed across Marcus's face suggested the tactic was working. "You're lying," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "Marshal Fletcher's presence suggests otherwise," Kate replied calmly. "Hollister's protection is gone, Marcus. He won't be arriving tomorrow to save you." Outside, the marshal called again. "You have 1 minute to release the hostages, or we're coming in." Marcus's options were dwindling rapidly. Thomas, wounded and increasingly pale from blood loss, looked to his brother for guidance, fear replacing his earlier bravado. Slade alone maintained his professional detachment, eyes calculating as he assessed exit routes. "It's over, Marcus," Kate said quietly. "Let Josiah go. Surrender to the marshal. It's your only chance to leave here alive." For a moment it seemed reason might prevail. Marcus's gun lowered fractionally, his expression shifting toward resignation. Then Slade made his move. With professional precision, he shoved Josiah toward Kate, creating momentary confusion as he drew a second, hidden pistol from his boot. His first shot caught Thomas Raven in the back, a coldly practical elimination of a liability. His second was aimed directly at Marcus's head, the betrayal swift and unexpected. Kate reacted with the instinctive speed that had made the ghost legendary. Her Remington barked once, catching Slade's shooting arm at the precise moment he fired at Marcus. The bullet meant for Marcus's brain went wide, grazing his temple instead and sending him crashing to the floor, stunned but alive. Slade recovered with professional quickness, adjusting his aim toward Kate, despite his wounded arm. Before he could fire, multiple shots exploded from the saloon's entrance. Marshal Fletcher and his deputies had breached the building. Slade made a final, desperate attempt to complete his mission, swinging his gun toward the fallen Marcus. Kate's second shot ended the attempt permanently, catching the professional gunman in the chest with lethal accuracy. The silence that followed seemed deafening after the chaos of gunfire. Marshal Fletcher advanced cautiously into the saloon, rifle raised, flanked by armed deputies. Behind them came Madison, his injured arm still in its sling, but his revolver held competently in his left hand. "Sheriff Madison," Fletcher acknowledged with a professional nod. "Situation?" "Under control, Marshal," Madison replied, holstering his weapon as he surveyed the scene. "Thanks to Mrs. Sullivan here." Kate lowered the Remington slowly, the familiar weight of the pearl-handled gun suddenly strange in her hand. The calm detachment that had carried her through the confrontation began to recede, leaving her acutely aware of Josiah's ragged breathing as he recovered from his ordeal, of Harriet emerging cautiously from the storeroom, of the marshal's deputies securing a semi-conscious Marcus Raven. "Catherine Reeves," Marshal Fletcher said, approaching her with careful respect. "Or do you prefer Kate Sullivan now?" The question hung in the air, laden with significance beyond the immediate moment. Which name she claimed now would determine her future. whether the ghost would return to face justice for past crimes, or whether Kate Sullivan would continue the life she had built in Juniper Valley. "Kate Sullivan," she replied firmly, holstering the Remington. "The ghost died 6 years ago." Fletcher studied her thoughtfully, then nodded. Convenient timing, her death coincided with certain documents finding their way to territorial authorities. Documents that prevented a massive land fraud and saved dozens of legitimate claims. He glanced meaningfully at the subdued Marcus Raven. Documents that certain parties have been desperate to recover ever since. "Is that so?" Kate replied neutrally. "Indeed." Fletcher gestured toward the saloon doors, where Nathaniel Reed now stood, looking decidedly satisfied despite a fresh bloodstain on his sleeve. "Your friend Mr. Silver was most helpful in explaining the situation when we encountered him on the Ridge Road." Kate's eyes narrowed slightly at Nathaniel, who shrugged. "With the innocence of a lifetime deceiver, seemed prudent to send for reinforcements," he explained, "especially once we realized Hollister might be involved." "Speaking of Hollister," Madison interjected, moving to check Thomas Raven's wounds with practical concern, despite their adversarial relationship. "What happens when he arrives tomorrow?" Fletcher's smile was coldly satisfied. "Sherman Hollister was arrested in Denver 3 days ago, based on evidence provided by an anonymous source. His arrival tomorrow would have been somewhat difficult, given his current accommodations in the territorial prison. The revelation completed the dismantling of Marcus Raven's world. The last resistance seemed to drain from him as deputies hauled him to his feet. His eyes sought Kate's, hatred momentarily eclipsed by confusion. "You won," he said finally, disbelief evident in his voice. "The ghost always worked alone. How?" Kate glanced around at the people who had risked everything to stand with her. Harriet tending to Josiah's injuries, Robert emerging from the smithy with Elijah and the Chen girl safely behind him, Madison directing the care of even their wounded adversaries, Nathaniel watching with the quiet satisfaction of a mentor whose student had surpassed expectations. "I wasn't alone," she replied simply. That was the difference. Dawn broke clear and cold over Juniper Valley 2 days later. Kate stood on the rise overlooking the charred remains of her ranch, the ashes now cool after the Ravens' destructive rampage. Behind her, the Silverback Mountains caught the morning light, peaks gilded in gold against the azure sky. "Quite a view," Harriet observed, approaching on horseback with medical bag secured to her saddle. "Worth rebuilding for." Kate nodded, acknowledging both the literal view and the metaphorical perspective it offered. "John chose this spot for that very reason, said a person should always be able to see where they've been and where they might go." The doctor dismounted, joining Kate at the edge of the rise. "Marshal Fletcher left this morning, took the Ravens back to Denver for trial, said to tell you your statement about the strongbox robbery was most helpful in closing several outstanding cases." "And the matter of the ghost?" Kate asked quietly. "Officially, the ghost died 6 years ago in a confrontation near Laramie," Harriet replied with careful precision. "Any resemblance to certain citizens of Juniper Valley is purely coincidental and not worth official scrutiny." She glanced sidelong at Kate. "Seems you have friends in unexpected places." Kate smiled slightly, remembering Fletcher's parting words, an acknowledgement that justice and the law sometimes travel different paths. The territorial marshal had made his choice, allowing the ghost to remain a closed chapter while Kate Sullivan continued her life in peace. "What will you do now?" Harriet asked, gesturing toward the burned homestead. Kate surveyed the destruction thoughtfully. 6 years of careful building reduced to ash and memory, yet unlike the night the Ravens had first attacked, she felt no despair at the sight, only determination. "Rebuild," she answered simply. "Better this time." As if summoned by her words, riders appeared on the road from town, Robert Cooper and his son Elijah, Josiah Winters, Madison with his arm still in its sling, and behind them, wagons carrying lumber and supplies. More followed. Townspeople, Kate recognized from years of careful distance, now approaching with purpose and tools. "Told you they'd come," Harriet said with quiet satisfaction. "When word spread you were planning to rebuild, half the town volunteered, the other half sent supplies." Kate watched their approach with an emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel. In years, belonging. These people had seen beyond her careful disguise, had accepted both the ghost's deadly skills and Kate Sullivan's quiet strength, had fought beside her not out of fear or manipulation, but out of genuine community. "John would have liked this," she said finally. "He always believed in second chances." "And third ones, apparently," Harriet observed wryly. "Though I suspect this version of Kate Sullivan might be the most genuine yet, neither running from her past nor trapped by it." As the first wagon reached the burned homestead, Nathaniel Reed appeared on the ridge path, moving with the deliberate care of a man whose joints protested the morning chill. He carried his rifle with the ease of long familiarity, but it rested casually in the crook of his arm, rather than held ready for threat. "Thought you'd be halfway to Canada by now," Kate greeted him, genuine warmth in her voice. Nathaniel snorted, surveying the growing activity below with grudging approval. Considered it, then figured someone ought to stick around to make sure. "You don't get soft again." A hint of pride crept into his gruff voice. "Besides, a place like this could use someone keeping watch from the high ground." Kate understood the offer beneath his characteristically indirect approach. Not just assistance with rebuilding, but a permanent presence, a transition from solitary hermit to community member. The phantom, like the ghost, finding an unexpected home in Juniper Valley. "The spare cabin could use a tenant," she suggested. "Once it's rebuilt." Their eyes met in understanding, mentor and student, now equals with shared history and new purpose. Nathaniel nodded once, then turned his attention to the valley below, where Madison was organizing the volunteers into work parties. "Best get down there," he advised, "before they put your new house in the wrong spot." As Kate descended toward the bustling activity, she felt the weight of the Remington at her hip, a weight she had once tried to deny, then been forced to reclaim. Now it rested differently, neither hidden in shame nor worn with pride, but simply one part of who she was. The Ravens had indeed cornered a lonely widow, intending to expose and destroy the ghost they had hunted for years. Instead, they had inadvertently completed the transformation Catherine Reeves had begun 6 years ago. Not the erasure of her past, but its integration into something stronger, something rooted not in isolation, but in connection. Kate Sullivan approached her future with clear eyes and steady hands, ready to build something that honored both who she had been and who she had become. And if trouble ever again found its way to Juniper Valley, it would face not just the legend of the ghost, but the reality of a community standing together, a combination far more formidable than any lone gunslinger could ever be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.